All right, everybody. Well, sorry for this video being late. I actually recorded it yesterday like I said I would. But when I tried to edit it, the quality was so bad. Like I don't know what happened. Like the video and the audio was terrible. So I didn't want to shortchange you guys. So I wanted to retry, and we'll see how this goes. So, excuse me. So first of all, thank you for being a patron. Thank you for supporting this channel through your donations. I think last month went very well regarding the content and regarding the engagement and all of that kind of stuff. And so you guys were a big part of that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If I owe you a one-on-one or a video topic of your choice, that is also coming. I wanted to focus on the election last month, so that's why things are a little bit later than I hope they would be. So anyway, let's jump right into the questions, and I'll do as best as I can to answer as many as I can. I only promise one answer per person, but some of you might get more than one. We'll see how it goes. Now, let's get started. So the first question comes from Zach. He says, do you have any thoughts on Mike Winger? Sorry, I don't know who that is. I've heard the name, but I don't know if I've ever read anything of him or seen any of his videos or whatever he does. I don't know, so I can't really answer. Sorry about that. But that's unfortunately the correct answer. The next question comes from Calvin. He says, Doug Wilson's Rules for Reformers has a great bit in Section 4 about cool shaming. He says, the ruling elites have a deep set of pathologies going, and many of them have by now manifested themselves as severely dysfunctional. But one of their pathologies that still works on a lot of people is their ability to act convincingly like they're still the arbiters of cool. How do you see cool shaming at play in the current election? Just to add a layer to this, I'm convinced that one of our greatest idols is respectability. So thanks for the question. I honestly don't know really what to think about this, because you're right. There's definitely the impression given that there's still sort of like this, you're in or you're out. Like if you're for Biden, you're in. If you're not for Biden, you're out. That's the impression that you get when you're on social media, when you're looking at, cable TV or whatever it is. You see Lady Gaga, doing that stupid video. That was so cringe. That was just a horrible video. So there's just definitely this impression, though, that like all our cultural elites, our athletes, our movie stars, everyone who does music, they're all for a certain kind of politics. But I wonder how real that is, because social media certainly has a way of skewing what reality is. And so I wonder if some of that is contrived and how much of that is actually just the algorithm. So I don't know. I mean, I personally, like the people that I know that saw that Lady Gaga video, for example, they just cringe, man. It's just like, is she serious? Is he really trying to do this? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So I wonder how much of that is just the optics and what it looks like versus reality. I don't think that stuff is. I don't think too many people are fooled by that. Like, does anyone really care what Cardi B is telling you to do for the election? I guess some people probably do, but I just wonder how big of an impact that is. And to be honest, like there are probably some people that are for Trump that also have sort of that kind of thing. Well, so and so is for Trump, so I'm for Trump kind of thing. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I think honestly that a lot of this stuff on the left is so cringe that they've almost made it. It's almost like the cool thing to be not for Biden. I don't know. Like I really don't know how to articulate what I'm trying to say, but like it's almost like naughty to be for Trump at this point. And so they've almost overplayed their hand in some respects. So again, I don't really know how much of this is just optics and how much is real, as far as how cool it is to be a lefty. But what I do know is that lefties are very good at controlling sort of how people are educated and how they start to think as they grow up and stuff like that with public schools and that. I think that's more important than the cool factor. I don't know. But actually, Rules for Reformers, Cal, is on my reading list. I just bought it the other day at the conference. So maybe I'll know more once I read it. Thanks for the question, man, and I appreciate the support. All right. James has this to say. He says, keep up the good work, AD. There are many wolves in sheep's clothing out there. When you shake these people, their teeth are exposed. Wolves still have a fallen nature. They have teeth for killing and devouring. Sheep, on the other hand, have teeth useful for consuming food so they can feed others, not for killing and devouring. Don't get discouraged when you're attacked by these wolves in sheep's clothing. James, that is not a question, but thank you. No, I appreciate that. I don't really know why this is, but I have no problem at all being attacked by by wolves. Rather, it doesn't bother me. I don't take it seriously. I absolutely take criticism seriously, depending on who it comes from. When it comes from someone who's an obvious wolf, I just disregard it. Like, I'll read it, but I'll disregard it and I'll probably mock it, because the thing is, like, you'd have to be crazy to let your enemies, ideological enemies or real enemies, control how you fight. Like, you should only listen to God. So God's rules on how to fight, those are the ones that matter. But if Thabiti Anyab Willie wants to say that I'm mean or my tone is bad, like, I'm going to disregard that and laugh at you. That's ridiculous. You never let your opponent tell you how to fight. That's crazy. So, brother, thank you for the encouragement. But for some reason, I know a lot of people get really troubled when they get criticized by their opponents, even if it's like an underhanded way. I just never do. But I do take criticism seriously from people that are on my own team. So anyway, thank you so much, brother. This is from Matthew. He says, what do you think are some objections some people would raise for voting Republican and try to soothe the conscience to vote Democrat? I've never heard any actual objections other than Trump is mean. Curious if you have heard anything else. Yeah, there's a few different kinds of objections. Some of them are completely illegitimate and some of them are legitimate. What I hear is that, Republicans don't care about the poor. Kirk Kennedy tried to say that. Well, you should be church disciplined because Republicans don't care about the poor. And I guess that's a reference to Republicans not liking welfare as much as Democrats or something like that. I don't really know what he's trying to say, but they try to put it so that, like, Democrats are better at social issues and Republicans are better at the economy. That's false, right? That's completely illegitimate. There's nothing about a Republican platform that says they don't care about the poor. So that's something that's illegitimate. But I think there are some legitimate criticisms of the Republican Party. In fact, let's talk about welfare. They actually are for welfare inappropriately. So, like, Republicans have a kind of a skewed worldview as well. I think they buy a lot of the liberal propaganda that's out there. Like, it's like, well, Republicans are not against welfare. They just want to limit it a little bit more than Democrats. But they should actually be against welfare completely. Like that's a good reason to not vote Republican. I don't think I wouldn't accept that reasoning. But if somebody said the Republicans are just Democrats light a lot of the time, you know what I mean? Like, they're not for welfare, but they kind of are. They're for a lot of welfare, maybe just not as much as Democrats. Same thing with abortion. Like, a lot of Republicans seem to want to limit abortion, but they don't seem to want to do the right thing and end abortion. That's a good reason to not vote Republican. Same thing with taxes. Like, they're still for exorbitant taxes, just not as exorbitant as Democrats. So those are, like, legitimate reasons to vote Republican, but they're not good reasons to vote for Democrat, because each one of those, as you can see, the Democrats are actually worse. And so when you compare the things that I have against Republicans, the Democrats do it also, but just worse. And so it's not a good argument for one over the other when you're, like, trying to talk about, soothing the conscience to vote Democrat. So, but yeah, I mean, the objections against voting Republican in favor of the Democrats, for a Christian, I've never heard a good argument or a good case for that. It's just absolutely insane, the cases that I have heard. Thanks for the question, brother. I appreciate it. Okay. 2 questions here from Paul. First one is, if a once solid teacher has gone woke, would you still recommend his good books and sermons to others? Should you do so with a warning and not just recommend his stuff at all? My take on this is it depends, right? Because I'll give you an example. So Tim Keller, I don't recommend him in general anymore. But he wrote a book that was very important to my conversion, The Prodigal God. And so what I would do is if I saw somebody and I knew him and he was in a similar situation to where I was when I came to Christ, and, like, so it made sense given the context of my relationship with this person or something, I might recommend that particular book to him at that moment. But I'm not just going to blanket recommend Tim Keller stuff. Like, I'm not going to say, if somebody says, give me a good theologian to read, I'm not going to say Tim Keller. But I might recommend a certain book at a certain moment if it makes sense. Would I do it with kind of like a caveat, like a warning, like, hey, Tim Keller's not great on everything, but this is great? Yeah, I probably would do something like that. Definitely. But I don't think it's like Tim Keller, his opinions on certain things are bad now, so I'm not going to ever recommend anything he's ever done or said for the rest of the time. No, it's not like that, but I'm going to pick my spots better. There's a lot better theologians out there than Tim Keller for just general theology. So if there's like a certain book for a certain moment at a certain time, yeah, I might recommend a certain book. But I'm not going to just do the blanket recommendation, oh, Tim Keller's great. No, I'm not doing that anymore. It's just too dangerous. You don't want your friends to be dabbling in wokedom. It's a different religion. It's pagan. Anyway, next question from Paul. He says, do you think personal character and morality matters in political leaders? How much importance should we put on it? Were Christians wrong to think the Lewinsky scandals disqualified Bill Clinton from being president? No, morality and personality, personal character do matter, definitely, because, and this is why I didn't vote for Trump in the beginning. I thought that his personality would be horrible for a president, and I was wrong. I mean, he was a pretty good president in general. The things that I thought were wrong about his personality, the arrogance, the kind of the sneakiness, the lies and stuff like that, the sexual immorality, they haven't carried over into his leadership, at least not in any dangerous kind of a way. And so like the Lewinsky scandal was different because he was the president at the time when he was doing these things. He was the president at the time when he lied to Congress. And so it's like, dude, like you're in office right now. You like your character actually matters a lot. But the character flaws for Trump, they didn't carry over to his time in office. I didn't vote for him the first time around because I thought they would. I was wrong. And so, he was sexually immoral years and years and years ago. That mattered to me. But what matters a lot more is if you're using your authority as the president of the United States to be sexually immoral in the White House and do sexually immoral things and have different sexually immoral policies and all of that kind of stuff. So yes, personality does matter. But when you have 4 years of evidence like we do with Trump and you see, well, some of his character flaws, they're still there, but they don't seem to be carrying over into policy. He seems to be fairly conservative with his policy. Then that's very different than Clinton, who, yeah, he was sexually immoral for forever, and he continued in the White House, and his policies were all immoral. It's a very different situation. So good question, Paul. I appreciate it. Thanks for the patronage, brother. Andrew, thank you for your question as well. Here's what he says. When approaching each other brothers and sisters on the subject and talking past each other, do you think it's helpful to simply go together with them to the Dallas Statement on Social Justice and the Gospel and go over each of the affirmations and denials with their scripture references? Would you recommend this? In your opinion, how useful is this document for the conversation? It seems to me that the document's very good and is underutilized by our side. Good question, man. I think it could be a very good thing to do, especially with someone that you know. I would argue that you don't want to necessarily go just throw them the Dallas Statement and say, here, look at this, read this, out of context and stuff like that. Because what they're going to do is they're going to Google it, and then they're going to Google, Thabiti Anyabwili's response, and Thabiti's going to say, it's racist. And it's going to frame their whole reading of it. Instead, what you might want to do is go through it with them and go through the specific aspects of it that that Thabiti was so upset about, or whoever. There was one section on culture and saying how Christian culture is superior to other cultures. That's a very non-controversial statement when you read it in itself. But when Thabiti Anyabwili is saying, well, that's just code word for racism, that might flavor how they read it. And so I would recommend, if you're going to use it, definitely use it. It's a good statement. It's not perfect, but it's good. Go through it with them and pick out the parts that are more supposedly controversial and say, is there anything that you disagree with on this? And chances are they're going to say no if they're a Christian. And then I would suggest taking them through the criticisms of it and saying, okay, so if there's nothing you disagree with it, then tell me why Thabiti or whoever it was said that this part was racist. Is there anything really racist about this? And I think that would be a very useful tool as far as saying, see, like, racism is often just assumed because you read this, nothing racist about it. Now you look at an analysis of it, they're saying, well, it's white supremacy. That could be a very useful tool. That's a great idea, Andrew. And you're right. I think this is probably underutilized. Might want to think about that for my own content as well. Andrew, that's a really good point, brother. Thank you for the patronage. I appreciate it. Andrew actually had a second question, which I will answer. It says, if my elders take the Lehman position of, quote, a Christian should not vote Democrat but refuse to pursue Matthew 18, do I need to find another church or can I stay and keep trying to work towards reform? I think either option is legitimate. Okay? Either option is legitimate. Here's one caveat, though, Andrew. If the elders of the church also won't discipline another elder for voting Democrat, like, in other words, if the leadership is divided on this and you've got some elders that are actually voting Democrat and the elders won't confront the other elder, that's a big problem. You should leave your church most likely for something like that. that's a division that makes no sense. But if you're talking about just random run-of-the-mill, people in the pews kind of thing, and they won't discipline someone in the pews, I think that's legitimate to leave if you want. I might leave a church like that. I'm not sure. It depends on the details. But I think staying and fighting for reform is definitely valid, man. I think, that's a very tough thing sometimes to know when to stay and fight and when to leave. And I think it's just nuance, man. I don't want to be a squish, but it just depends. It depends on the details, man. Because if they're not going to pursue Matthew 18 and teach correctly and then confront and then excommunicate on the issue of people voting for Democrats, that's a pretty good sign that they might not do it at all. So if they're not doing any kind of church discipline at all, like it's not even on the table, that might be a time to leave. But if they do church discipline, but maybe need some convincing that this is an issue that you ought to do that with, maybe you stay and try to work that out with people and see how, show them how it works and talk with them and pray with them and all that kind of stuff. You see what I mean? Like, it kind of depends on the details. But I think either option is legitimate, but it's totally different if the leadership is jacked up on this. Like I was telling I remember when I had my church plant, somebody asked me, would I excommunicate someone who believed that homosexuality was okay, but they weren't gay themselves, but they believed that it might be okay. And I was saying, well, I would definitely not put up with a leader who believed that. Not at all. No way. But a new Christian who comes in, doesn't know anything, like I'm not ready to excommunicate them right away, but I do want to teach them correctly. I do want to confront them about that. And so that's going to be a little bit more of a slow roll type thing where you work with someone and stuff like that. But a leader, totally different. Totally different. Anyway, brother, thank you for the question. Daniel has this to say. I completely agree that unrepentant Democrats should be church disciplined, but under law, would that be considered voter coercion? And if so, does that at all impact how it should be approached? Daniel, good question. Unfortunately, I don't know what voter coercion is, and I don't know the law well enough to really answer. But I will say this, though. If it was somehow against the law to do that, it wouldn't matter as long as it's something that you should do. So we need to listen to God about who's in and who's out of the church. Instead of men. Like it wouldn't matter to me at all, because one day it might be illegal to kick out homosexuals of your church and church discipline homosexuals, but it doesn't mean you still should do it, right? So I don't know. Sorry, I can't really answer it because I just don't know what the law says about that. But I don't think it should impact how it should be approached. I think it should be one of those things where it's like, sorry, Caesar, I got to do what I got to do. You got to do what you got to do. I'm a pastor. I work for Christ. I'm a minister of Christ. I'm not a minister of you. So I have to do what I have to do. It's just one of those things that a pastor, heavy is the crown, man. We're about to enter a period of United States history that it's going to be very difficult to be a pastor. So pray for your pastors and find a good one that will keep track of your soul, brother. JGS, you asked a couple questions here about comments about a couple of books, it looks like, and asked me if I was familiar with them. One of them was a course on libertarian legal theory, and the other one was a book called How Human Laws Bind the Conscience and How They Do Not. And you asked for my thoughts. Unfortunately, JGS, I just haven't read them. I haven't watched the video that you linked here either, but that's something that I could do. It's just going to have to be in line because I got a lot of stuff going on with people asking me to review things and read things and lots of stuff, not enough time to do it. So, brother, sorry, I'm not trying to dodge your question. I just haven't read these things, unfortunately. So, sorry, brother. All right. A couple more questions here. We've got one from Chandler. He says, thoughts on building a free and more secure and stable household in the few coming years? One particular question, how important is it to get somewhere where you're surrounded by like-minded Christian community? Brother, I'm going to be talking a lot more about this on my channel, so thank you for the question. Basically, what you're talking about is being kind of more locally minded, right? I think this is crucial. This is crucial for the future because the reality is that as we're seeing, digital life is changing. They're censoring the sitting president of the United States whenever they feel like it, whenever they don't like it. They're canceling news reporting if they don't like it. Like, just not because it's not factual, it's just because they don't like the story. So they banned an entire newspaper, a very old, very established, very reputable newspaper from social media. Social media is still useful, but I think eventually it could become to the point where it wouldn't be useful anymore. And so you need to have a local body of people that you trust, that'll get your back, that'll help you through difficult times if you lose your job. Like eventually we're all going to have to sign the statement that says that LGBT is the most important thing ever since sliced bread, and I love it, and all that kind of stuff. And when we don't sign, we're going to lose our jobs. And so we need to have people that have our back, people that we can be with in a community. So a like-minded Christian community is like a built-in local body or support system or whatever you want to call it. I'm in a very blessed situation where people in my church, we've got handymen, we've got farmers, we've got some businessmen, like we've got everything we need in our local community. That's crucial, guys. You need to have people that you know, that live close to you, that you trust, families, neighbors. You need to trust the people around you. And I think that a like-minded Christian community is going to be crucial in the coming decades. So if you don't have that right now, start finding it. Start finding it. Find people with backbone that will lock arms with you in a fight if you need to be in a fight. I'm not saying go looking for a fight, but if the fight comes to you, you need people you can trust, man. Everyone should have what Moscow, Idaho has. You know what I mean? A group of people that'll go to war with you. They'll go to prison with you if they have to, whatever it takes. Brothers, it's a great question, Chandler. I intend to dedicate a lot more of my content in the future to this exact topic. In fact, I just started this is not really the same thing, but I just got a P.O. box so that you can send me written letters if you'd like, because I think that my life on digital means of communication is probably numbered. So anyway, but a great question, and look forward to seeing more content about that topic, Chandler, in the coming days. All right, last question, or second to last question, not my real name, says this. What are your thoughts on the exit polls regarding faith and race breaks down? Looks like Trump did a lot better with every demographic group than he did in 2016, other than white men. Why? Yeah, man. Well, white men have been beaten down into submission over the last 4 years, man. I'm surprised that Biden didn't do even better with white men, because think about it. Everything you hear, everything you see, every visual, every optic, it's supposed to make white men feel bad. Honestly, a lot of white guys, especially when you consider like single white men who are not married, who don't own property and stuff like that, like they've become cucked big time. Big time. If you're not familiar with that word, or if you don't like that word, sorry, it's just the reality of the situation. You look at married white men in general, people that own property, they're still for Trump in big numbers. When you look at single white men that don't own anything and stuff like that, they're more for Biden. They've been cucked big time. And the thing is, though, I'm not saying, look, if you're single and you're hearing this, I'm not saying that you're a cuck. What I'm saying, though, is that your demographic group, this is not a rule, but it's just the demographic group is going to be more and more and more and more blue as time goes on, unless something is done about it, man. You guys got to find your balls, man. I'm not saying you guys, and this audience obviously is different, but your single friends, are going to need to find their cojones. You know what I mean? It's just that simple. But yeah, the demographics are super interesting, man. They're super interesting. I think that what you're seeing is the result of just year after year after year just being beaten down into submission by feminists, by these social justice warriors, and these men have become effeminate. They become effeminate. They need daddy to take care of them. They need their sugar daddy, man. Daddy, can I go out? Can I have some extra allowance? Daddy, can I go out at a certain? Daddy, can I go to the store without wearing a mask? Like, Daddy, can I open up my business again? Like, that's not what men do, man. Men are like, no, I'm just not doing it. I'm gonna open up my business. It's just not for me. You ever seen that scene in Bronx Tale when the mob boss tries to give the kid's father a job, and he says no to the mob boss? And he's not trying to be big and bad or anything. He's not trying to fight him or anything, but he's like, I can't do it. It's not for me. Like that's what a man does. Like, no. The answer is just no. I know who you are. I don't want to offend you. You're a powerful guy. I get it. No. Just saying no sometimes is enough, man. The kind of guys that are cucked, they can't say no to a woman. They can't say no to a black guy. Like Jamar Tisby asks them for money. They say, yes, sir. How much do you want? Saying no to women, saying no to woke black guys is a dying art in many circles, man. Don't worship women. Don't fear black guys. It's just not. That's not how you do this, man. Nobody respects somebody like that. And what you're seeing is the result of that. So sorry if you don't like the word cuck. I'm sorry, but I'm using it because that's just the reality of the situation. All right, one more question, I believe. This one is not a public question, but I'm gonna read it and I'm not gonna answer it completely. So I'm not gonna say who said it, and I'm going to tell the person that if they want, I can get them my copy of the Doug Wilson book, Standing on the Promises. This is a really good book, and it explains what you're asking about here. So here's what he says. He says, I have something in mind, but I didn't want to approach it in a public question, so I wanted to send you a private message to get my advice on something I'm trying to understand. The context is I'm going to a Presbyterian church for the first time. We love this church, but one thing the pastor said with regards to something Doug Wilson teaches is that he put forth the idea that if you do everything right as a father to God's word, who does that anyway, that you're guaranteed to have children who will be faithful Christian believers. Now, I find that hard to believe myself, as that would contradict the doctrine of election, but I was wondering if you have heard this concern or criticism about what Doug teaches. Is it an accurate understanding of his belief? And I would be curious what you yourself believe about this and what Presbyterian general thinking is there on this. I wonder if it's related to the idea of covenant children, that would lead a person to think this way. It's especially concerning to myself because my wife and I have a younger daughter who has lived a life of complete rebellion to the Lord in spite of our earnest warnings and teaching her scripture, and I'm trying to grasp how people would view my situation in a Presbyterian church. It's a complex discussion, so maybe this is too much for you to address. And then he asked, maybe we can talk one-on-one about it. Yes, we can definitely talk one-on-one about it. It's a very complicated question, you're right. But I would recommend that you actually read Doug on this. It's called Standing on the Promises. If you want this copy, I can send it to you, brother. Just message me. This is a book I've given away a number of times, so I keep rebuying it. Anyway, fantastic book, right? Because as a Presbyterian, I would say that God has made promises to the children of believers, the children of people that are in his covenant. That's why we talk about our children as being in the covenant, right? And but these promises aren't like formulas, right? Like it's like reading the Proverbs. You see in the Proverbs it says, "Teach up a child in the way he should go, and when he's older, he won't depart from it." That's not a formula. But it's a promise that we need to hold on to. In fact, that's part of faith. Like when I pray about my children to the Lord, I say, Lord, you yourself have promised certain things about my children, and you know that's how I pray. I try to hold on to those promises, and part of having those promises and holding on to those promises is being faithful for myself, right? And as you said, there is no such thing as a perfect father, but I have faith and I act accordingly. I try to make it my own. I'm after holiness when it comes to raising my kids. Man, I mess up all the time, but I have faith that God's covered me, right? I have faith that God has made me holy, has covered my sins, right? And so I pray to God as if that's actually true, right? He's covered me. And so I pray God's promises back to him all the time, right? Not that he's in my debt or anything like that, but I remind him of what he said. You see in the Bible, people do that all the time. When they pray to God, they talk about, God, you said this. God, remember when you, of course God remembers, but this is, the prayer is for us to remember it as well, right? And so I don't think that Doug Wilson teaches is an automatic formula, but I do think he teaches you to hold on to those promises. Like those promises are actually meaningful. And so as far as how do I view a situation where someone has a rebellious kid, well, I mean, I don't have your details, brother, so I can't really speak to that. But what I will say though is, wherever you're at, whether you have a kid who's rebellious and they're like a teenager, or you have a kid who's rebellious who's a 7-year-old, what you actually do about it is going to be different depending on how old they are and how much authority you have over them. Maybe they're an adult already. I don't know. But the point is, like, you have to start where you're at and start being faithful where you're at. And so whatever that means, like, I'm not saying this is you, but let's just say you've been slack on discipline or whatever it is, then you need to start obeying when it comes to discipline. Let's say it's an adult kid and stuff like that. Well, what you can do is you can be faithful and pray for them and communicate with them and give them the gospel and all that kind of stuff. Like wherever you're at, you got to be faithful. And brother, let me just encourage you. My parents were faithful parents, right? They both were believers. None of them were perfect. Neither of them were perfect, but they were believers. And I know they held on to the promises of God, right? But if you would have looked at my life when I was 30 or my late 20s, you would have been like, man, God failed there. God failed. Because I was doing all kinds of drugs. I was snorting cocaine all the time. I was all kinds of sexual immorality. You know, like I was gone. But God was faithful. My sister, similar. If you would have saw her in her late 20s living like a complete pagan, God has failed. He promised my parents, and now she's back in the fold. You understand what I'm saying? So let me just encourage you, man. It's not a lost cause. You need to hold on to those promises, man. You need to pray those promises back to God. Again, it's not like he owes you, because you know you're not perfect. But if you're faithful to God and you're keeping covenant, you know that even if we're faithless, God is faithful, and so we need to hold on to that. Part of having faith is believing the promises of God. And so I would encourage you, brother, to read the promises of God about the children of people in his covenant. I would encourage you to do that. And so again, it's not a formula, but believing those promises is a duty. You need to do that. So we can talk maybe one-on-one about this. I know it's very private. It's very private. So I get it. I get it, man. And I don't want to say the wrong thing by just overgeneralizing, but you should definitely read this. If you want my copy, let me know, man. I'll send it to you. Anyway, guys, thank you for being a patron. Thank you for supporting this channel. I love you guys. I couldn't do this without you. I've been able to dedicate so much time into the content for this channel that I would not have been able to do without you guys. And it's been, I'm overwhelmed sometimes about the support and the love and the prayers and all that kind of stuff. Thank you for being a part of this. I think if you could see the emails that I get about the helpfulness that people find in this content, I know it would warm your heart, man, because you guys are part of that. You guys are part of that. And so I appreciate it. God bless you. Like I said, if you have a one-on-one ode to you or a video topic, it's coming. I just wanted to set everything aside for the election, but I'm getting to it now. God bless you. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you found this video helpful. God bless.